Good morning, dear educators all over the Philippines and those watching us from the other countries. Welcome to the fourth day of the 2020 CAP Congress. We thank Father Alain Manalo, our outgoing CAP Secretary and Region 4 Trustee, for presiding over our Eucharistic celebration today from the St. Mary Magdalene Parish in Kawit, Cavite. Thank you, Father Alain. I am Marianne Cruz, the Deputy Executive Director of CAP, and I will be your moderator for this morning's session. Yesterday, we had 3 learning sessions based on the domains of the Philippine Catholic School Standards as the framework. We had sessions on Catholic identity and mission with a talk on the educating to fraternal humanism. For learning environment, we had the talk on place-based learning. And for learner development, we had educating the whole child. We continue with the next 3 domains today for our learning sessions for leadership and governance, operational vitality, and research and community engagement. Before we proceed with our session, we just want to respond to your frequently asked question on our Facebook page about e-certificates. We want to remind you that you only need to attend at least 1 session for each day for days 3 and 4. Today's day 4. And to submit an evaluation for 1 learning session for each day and a general evaluation at the end of the convention to get an e-certificate for the entire Congress. We will only issue 1 e-certificate, and that is for the entire Congress. And you need to submit 3 evaluation forms. 1 for each learning session per day, and 1 for the general evaluation, whose link will be live only tomorrow. So the link to this evaluation session, the link to the evaluation form for this session is already included in the caption to this video, both on Facebook and on YouTube. But this will go only live after the session has ended and will remain open until 7 p.m. today. So the link to the evaluation will only be open after the session. That will be at around 11:30 or 12 o'clock this morning and will remain open until 7 p.m. today. If you missed any of the session and you wish to watch all videos of the different sessions, these are all saved in the video section of our official CAP Facebook page and in our CAP channel on YouTube. So you can view and review all the videos anytime after they have been uploaded. As we begin, we encourage you to post your questions and comments at the comment section of the Facebook page or the chat box in the YouTube channel. And we will ask these questions and read the comments during the question and answer portion. Let me now introduce our session. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The VUCA world became all too real when the COVID-19 pandemic suddenly happened and we were all caught unaware. It disturbed our world, our universe rather. Our schools had to close abruptly because of community quarantine, and we had to all work from home. We were suddenly faced with a lot of problems. How do we respond to this? What will happen to the employees with a no work, no pay situation? How do we ensure the continuity of learning? What will the new school year look like? These are just some questions that the school leaders had to ask. Our resource person for today will share his views on leadership in a VUCA world, both from theory and experience, having held many leadership positions all these years. He will share his insights on the kind of leaders and leadership qualities that we need as we move forward to the next normal. Friends and co-educators, join me in welcoming the former president of Xavier University Cagayan de Oro and now the president of Ateneo de Manila University. Let's give it up for Father Roberto Bobby Up SJ. Let's give him a virtual round of applause. Take it away, Father Bobby.
Thank you, Marianne, for that nice introduction. Magandang umaga, ayong buntag sa tanan. Good morning to all. I'm very grateful for Ceap for inviting me to give this talk. I accepted it because it allowed me to gather my thoughts and insights I have gained from reading, from theory, and from practice about leadership in this very, very trying time, these very unusual circumstances we find ourselves in. So I'd like just to share from my experience and from the different theories that we know about leading in a VUCA world. Next slide, please. The contents, really, I'd like to talk about four things this morning. Um, yeah, just to tell you, if the slides are not very clear in your screens, please know that we will issue a PDF copy of the whole slide deck later after the discussion. Um, the content is first, I'd like to talk about four things. First, we just
Sige,
describe
testing lang.
how we
Manood
can
lang.
understand the COVID-19 pandemic as really a VUCA in action. Second, I think we like to reflect on the planning that we need to do, which is called in the literature as strategic crisis action planning. Third, I'd like to talk about leading during the crisis. Well, what are the qualities that we need for leading during this crisis? And I would like to end with some thoughts on the spirituality of crisis leadership. Next slide, please. I think we know this very well. COVID 19 is VUCA in action. Next slide, please. VUCA, as we know, is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. And I think this is what we've been talking about the last few days. Next slide, please. Then, of course, we know that COVID is very volatile. We know now that there's a first surge and a second surge, and it happens all very quickly. It's very unpredictable. It's out of our control. It's very uncertain. We don't know what action to take. We're not sure what it will be. We talk about possibly going face to face, but then no. We go blended, but no, we go online, and we're not sure. We're not sure also about who is a carrier of the virus. There is much testing that's needed. We have to do contact tracing and all that. No, we also know it's very complex. There's a lot of concerns about not only health, but it affects the whole economy. It affects how we organize socially. It affects how we conduct our schooling and almost all aspects of our life as a community and our life as citizens have been affected by this crisis. It's also very ambiguous. The environment is very unfamiliar and outside of our expertise. Next slide, please. This is what some theories have called, this is a landscape crisis. This is a hallmark, the outbreak as a hallmark of a landscape crisis. That means that there's an unexpected sequence of events, enormous scale, overwhelming speed. I think we all know that. It all happened very fast. There's a high degree of uncertainty, and this has given rise to disorientation, feeling of lost control, and strong emotional disturbance. So, in other words, this is another way to say VUCA. This is a landscape scale of crisis. Next slide, please. I think when we began, we were certainly had to deal with the COVID initial issues. First, we had to lock down our campuses. We had to establish health protocols, frequent hand washing, wearing face masks, physical distancing, face shields. We had to take care of our students. We had to take care of our teachers. We had to cancel graduations, etc. So initially, I think the first months especially, we really need to deal with the initial issues of COVID-19, prioritizing health and safety of our students and our teachers. Next slide, please. Um, but then, of course, we realized that that was just the beginning. There is a tsunami of ever more complex issues that lie ahead. After we deal with the COVID initial issues, we know that there is economic recession happening, and that there is really an economic downturn, an economic slowdown. We know livelihoods have been lost. Many people have lost their jobs. Many people have lost their livelihoods. OFW remittances are down. And therefore, there is really a case where we are in an economic downturn. And that we have to deal with also as part of these complex issues related to the pandemic. The third graph there is really the return to work. We also know that life has to go on. We need to continue with our Catholic educational mission. And how do we return to work? How do we return back to schooling for our students, for our teachers, for our families who send their children to us? How do we bring back the schools in this very uncertain, this very volatile world? And as if that were not enough, we also have to deal with what is the new normal or the next normal. What it will be like post pandemic, post coronavirus pandemic. What will it be like? We know, and I think we have a good sense that it will not be back to business as usual. We will not go back to the way it was before because there will really be a new normal, a next normal that will be coming up. And the real challenge is we really are not sure. This is part of the ambiguity and uncertainty. We are not sure what this new normal will be. Will it be predominantly online for us in our schools? Will it be blended? Will some face-to-face be allowed, etc., etc.? Will we continue working from home for our faculty, for our teachers, and for our office staff? We don't know, and but we have to deal with that new normal. Next slide, please. The next one I think is really this. I have gotten this a lot from McKinsey, the management consultancy. They say that leaders at this point really need to think across five horizons. First is really resolve. That means we deal with the initial issues, health and safety, health protocols very decisively and very deliberately. And we have to resolve that we protect and uphold the health and safety of our students and our teachers. Number two, we need to have resilience. We need to make sure that we are able to continue the educational mission in this pandemic. So we started preparing how do we do this online? How do we make sure that we have stable finances to be able to do this online, this work from home? And we had to suddenly try to check bandwidth and learning management platforms, etc. Then number three, we have to plan a detailed return. And I think we are at this point now. Most of us have already resumed our classes, resumed our schooling, and but we know that that plan is really a very different plan from what we used to, and we have to return. We are at that stage now. Many of us are in between two and three, but there's also four. We need to reimagine the next normal, what this discontinuous shift will look like, and implications for our schools and universities. What will this reimagination be like? And then number five, we have to think of reform. Be clear about the regulatory, the competitive environment of which we operate in our schools. Next slide, please. These three R's have been these five R's, sorry, have been translated into 5 R's of getting back to school. Resolve says focus on the immediate health threat that COVID-19 poses to students, teachers, staff, and community. Resilience, we address the near-term challenges, setting up remote control, our online learning platforms, concern about internet bandwidth, concern about arrangements for gadgets so that people can study and work from home. And we also try to support our vulnerable students who will have difficulty, they don't have gadgets, their internet connection is not so good, etc. Number three, return, is about reopening our schools and ensuring remediation for lost learning. Number four is reimagine. We need to think about what the next moral normal will be like. How do we need to reinvent ourselves in our educational system, in our Catholic school system? And then reform, we need to consider the priorities that we have in the light of the lessons that we have learned. As I said, we are, I think, between number two and number three. Most of us are in number three, return, but there's still more to come. We need to reimagine and we need to think about reform. Next slide, please. I go now to my second part, and I think this is one of the key things that we need to do for our leadership in our strategic, in this VUCA world that COVID has caused. We need to do what's called strategic crisis action planning. I think we are used to strategic planning and we are used to action planning, but we need to combine those and we need to know how to do strategic planning during a crisis and action planning during a crisis. Next slide, please. To do this strategic crisis action planning, I think we really need two leadership qualities. One is what is called deliberate calm, and second, bounded optimism. Next slide, please. To explain deliberate calm, it is really how do we steer into the storm? This is a real brewing storm, a very tough one, a very long one, and we need to practice how do we steer into the storm. Deliberate calm is defined as the ability to detach from this very tense situation, this very volatile situation, and think clearly about how one will navigate it. We cannot allow ourselves to panic. We cannot allow ourselves to be nervous and to be anxious. We need to practice deliberate calm, detach ourselves from the situation, and try to think clearly of how we can navigate this. And it is said that deliberate calm is really found in people, in leaders who possess humility. They know that they do not have all the answers. They know that there are many uncertainties. There are many things they do not know. But so therefore they are humble about it. But it is also leaders who are, that is very different from helplessness. You possess humility but not helplessness, and I think that's a very important distinction. Next slide, please. In deliberate calm, we say that we must take a deliberate choice to practice a calm state of mind. We try to keep calm. We step back and we choose. We make deliberate choices on how we can respond rather than just react instinctively, react emotionally to all the things, all the pressures that are happening. Leaders who practice deliberate calm are comfortable with discomfort, and we can look at adversity through a new lens. We can look at the challenges through a new lens. Next slide, please. In deliberate calm, also, we can use the fears that we have. It's not that we are never afraid. There can be some fears, but we try to make use of those fears. They can offer valuable information for us that we can use in our own planning. We can reframe a threat that is there as an opportunity for learning and innovation. There are many threats that we are facing in this COVID VUCA crisis, but we can use those threats as an opportunity for learning and innovation. It's also said actually that if you have deliberate calm, stress can be good if you can harness and frame it constructively, because at least your adrenaline is high, it keeps energy levels high, and you can be positive. So not to be really afraid of all these apparently negative things of fear, threat, and stress, but we can use it to our own advantage. Next slide, please. We go now to the second quality, which is bounded optimism. And this is how to mix confidence and hope with realism. Uh, During these times, leaders must really try to project confidence. We must project confidence to all our stakeholders, to our parents, to our teachers, to our students, to our administrators, that the university, the school will find a way through this tough situation. And that is one of the key challenges of a leader during this crisis. We must project confidence. But at the same time, we must also, when we project this confidence, we must also show clearly that we recognize the crisis's uncertainty and that we must grapple with this uncertainty. So that's why our optimism is bounded. So we project confidence, but we are also humble enough to recognize the uncertainties we are facing. Next slide, please. In bounded optimism, you know that in a situation like this COVID-19 pandemic, familiar answers will not work and could even be counterproductive. And in fact, you can lose credibility with your own faculty, with your own students, with your own parents by saying that you're excessively confident, that you're really sure about what to do, or you give simple answers to difficult problems. So it's really important that you practice bounded confidence during this time, project confidence, but also recognize that the crisis is really severe, it is volatile, it is uncertain, it is ambiguous. Next slide, please. How do you do this? How do you mix confidence and hope with realism? One key thing I think is that we practice what we call meaning making. Meaning making. Meaning that helps everyone remember that difficult times and long hours of work serve a purpose. Meaning that gives confidence, efficacy, and endurance, and can also serve as a balm if it's not the outcome that was hoped for, so that we are not so discouraged if we aim to do something and it doesn't resolve the way we want it to resolve, because the striving in and of itself was honorable. So this is very important in bounded optimism, that we do what is called meaning making. Next slide, please. Some examples of meaning making, like for example, we can set guiding principles as we are dealing with this VUCA crisis. We can say, for example, a Catholic school does what it can to assist those affected by the pandemic, and we will do what we can to try to help end the pandemic. We can say also very clearly to our stakeholders, a Catholic school prepares educational services creatively in the new normal. And we can also declare that the Catholic school will always take care of its people, its teachers, its students, its parents, its alumni, take care of the members of its community. Next slide, please. Also, I think part of meaning making, we can also set priorities that in whatever we are doing, we can say that we will maintain health and safety as a priority. We will maximize student learning and teaching as a priority. We will support our teachers and staff as a priority. And we will ensure a strong operational and financial future. We will try to manage our resources as best as we can. These are examples of what we can do to have meaning making, to try to instill confidence in our stakeholders as they work very hard to try to really manage and survive and thrive in this crisis. Next slide, please. Also, I think what's really important in strategic crisis action planning is you are really making decisions under uncertainty. And it's important that you approach each decision as a cycle. It's not linear. You have to do certain steps over and over again. And there are 4 steps in particular. First, you need to always pause, take time to pause and take stock. And then second, to assess the situation from multiple vantage points. Number 3, try to anticipate what is likely to happen and then act. And then after a certain period of the action, you repeat again. You pause, you assess, you anticipate, and then act. The pause button is especially important in a crisis. I was reflecting on this. I was still at Xavier at Trinity Cagayan during March, and we suddenly had to, of course, lock down the campus. We suddenly had to postpone graduations. And initially, we said, when we paused, we assessed it, we said, oh, this is just a few weeks. Uh, in the past, we had a certain similar health threat, but it just only took a few weeks. So we said, let's just take our time. And then when we tried to assess it, we realized it wasn't going to be a few weeks. So we said, oh, maybe this is just 1 month or 2. And so we started to plan when would we begin our school year, how would we do remediation if we started the school year differently for grade school, for junior high school, for senior high school, for college. Then after about a few weeks of that, we realized that no, uh, we were not going back to face in-person classes very soon. So we started to say we really need to seriously prepare for online and what we needed to do to prepare for that. So learning platforms, management platforms, Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, Moodle, and all those learning platforms, the training that we need to give our teachers, trying to make sure internet access was there, etc., etc. So what I'm trying to say is that this does happen because of the uncertainty. You really need to pause several times during the crisis to assess, to anticipate, and then to act. Right now, for example, I think one of the decisions we have to take is We know that first semester is online. We are going online, and now we have to even right away. We almost have to think now: what will second semester be like? Is there a chance that we can do face to face? Will it be blended? If it is face to face, how do we do it? How will we observe the health protocols of physical distancing, disinfecting the campus, etc.? And then even as we talk about that, then we also really have to plan now about the uncertain coming school year. What will school year 2021, 2022 be like? Will it be again cautious return to face, or will it be blended, or will it still be online? And I think that's why you really need to take these four specific steps in this decision making under uncertainty and do this often. Next slide, please. Next, yeah, please click. The first one, this is now, this slide is, maybe it can't be seen clearly, so please just click it until number 8. Just continue clicking. So this one, I'm sorry, it's not very clear, I think. Uh, this one is really, these are the different areas that the school needs to think about. And we say there's a COVID-19 nerve center where there's project management, scenario planning, communication. Number one, of course, we need to think of our students, their health and safety. We need to think about enrollment and admissions. Uh, the Ateneo de Manila, for example, has just announced that we will not have our usual entrance tests, and we will just have a different way of assessing our acceptance for the coming school year. We have what is credit, what is graduation. We've had different types of online graduations and online conferment. We need to think about assessment, especially in the teaching, the support services that we need to give. Number two there is really the teaching and the research, the infrastructure support, the training on this online platform. Can we still continue to do research in this online platform? The teaching that we need to do and the assessment that is a very important question. How do we assess the performance of our students? Number three, especially important for Catholic schools. We always say formation is very important for Catholic schools. How do we do formation in this online learning platform when we do not see our students face to face? They're not here in person. How do we continue formation activities, retreats, recollections, prayer groups, values formation in the context of an online learning platform? Number four, we need to think about our faculty and staff, their health and safety. We try to make sure that they can really work from home, they can collaborate, also their mobility. If they need to come to school, what can we provide? So we need to think about our faculty and staff. Number five, we need to think about campus operations, who can have access to the campus, health and safety provisions, incident management, technology provisions, auxiliary operations, so the campus itself. Number six, of course, is finance and legal, and this is very important. Financial stress testing, multi-scenario planning, cash management is really important. I've been told by our finance committee that the key variable, the key instrument you have to look at is cash flow. Do you have enough cash flow for your operations? During a crisis, liquidity is king. So you have to make sure that there is enough cash to sustain operations. And that can be very difficult also if revenues are not there. Number seven is we need to look at communications, internal, among our community, among our students, our faculty, our administrators, among our parents. Also external, how do we communicate with our different publics? And also our communications with the relevant government agencies, deped, CHED, Department of Health, the local government unit, IATF, etc. Number eight, again, because we're a Catholic school, we always have outreach, social engagement. We also need to think about that. How do we continue that essential aspect of a Catholic school, social development assistance? How do we continue to provide relief for COVID-19? And then we know also that how can we continue social formation of our students, forming their social conscience, raising their social awareness through the online learning platform. Next slide, please. Again, this is just a slide. If you look at the horizontal axis, the x-axis, this can be sort of the severity of the disruption. So here we can think about maybe from the left, you can think about the normal, and then you can start moving to the different acronyms of MGCQ, GCQ, MECQ, and ECQ as it gets harder and harder towards lockdown, from low risk to lockdown. And then on the y-axis, you have the disruption of our model, our business model. So I think we can think of our business model as the face-to-face, in-person that we are used to, and then we can move up to becoming blended, and then move up to online, and maybe the extreme would be that we are really just an open university, an open education institution, fully online. And I think we need to think about these dimensions also. I think in the blue circle there, hardly anyone is here where it's business as usual. I think we are in the circle above that, which is sustaining our schools and restoring operations. And then I think for the new normal, we are moving to the circle above that. Do we really need to shift our business model of our school? Next slide, please. Again, this is just a framework of strategic crisis action planning. We begin where we are, number one, then we go develop scenarios, then we try to establish directions. Then for the direction we have chosen, we think of the strategic moves, and then we do them, number five, and then you go back to a different starting position. And as I said, the decision making under certainty is always circular. Next slide, please. For us at Xavier University and Ateneo de Manila, we have always looked at, so far, we have been considering four scenarios before we started the first semester, and we are using the same scenarios as we are planning for the next coming school year. For a base scenario, I think we really need to think of that this is based on an economic downturn. There is recession. It is hard times economically. So we need to think about that. That's always a factor. And then we said our scenario one is what if we are really fully on site, but we know that to be fully on site, we have to cautiously return because we have to practice the health protocols of distancing, of monitoring, of disinfecting and preparing our campuses and having protocols to deal with emergencies. Scenario two we thought about is really full on-site. We make a complete digital shift. It's fully off-site, it's fully online. And then number three, we had a mix on-site, off-site combination. Next slide, please. So the first one was, can we do an on-site cautious return? Of course, government has to allow this. There has to be physical distancing. We know that we might have to do shifting because we cannot have our classrooms can fill 40, but because of physical distancing, we might have to cut that down to about 20, to about half, and therefore there has to be shifting of classes. Also, alternative work arrangements required to maintain physical distancing in the offices. We might have to renovate certain places, certain common areas, build barriers, etc. So these are the things that we have to think about in this scenario of on-site cautious return. Next slide, please. Of course, the next one is really the shared understanding, the off-site, the digital shift that's needed, that we are going online. And so everybody will be off-site and all aspects, including the administrative processes, academic and non-academic, predominantly online. We are now experimenting a lot on this. Is it synchronous? Is it asynchronous? Is it a combination of both? We are trying to see, should we have smaller classes so that the teachers can pay extra attention to their students? Some of us are experimenting on should we have fewer subjects per quarter so that they can focus on just a few subjects in this new online learning platform, uh, what auxiliary services are needed, IT support, materials development support, etc., to make sure that this will work. So these are the things that you think about in this scenario of offsite online learning. Next slide, please. The next slide is the scenario of mix, in a sense that we are starting to understand that there could be waves, as we know now. There's now a second wave, a third wave of the infection. So maybe that we can go back to to some cautious return, but at a certain point we might have to go back to online and do this shift off-site and on-site back and forth. And therefore, how do we manage this? How do we manage this situation where there are different waves of the pandemic, of the infection, and we need to shift back and forth off-site and on-site, and we need therefore to plan how we will do our classes so that the shifting back and forth is really smooth as possible. Uh, Also, in this scenario, you start to think about blended. What if we combine that there will be some classes which will be face to face, but there will be some classes that will have to be off-site and online, and how do we do that mixture? So this is that particular scenario of mixing. And this is what you do in the strategic planning. I've identified the areas and possible scenarios that we need to do. And hopefully, you always do this with deliberate, calm, and bounded optimism. Next slide, please. I go now to my third talk, third as part of my talk, which is the leading during this crisis, leading when there is VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Next slide, please. I divide this part into two parts. I think the leader during this time must turn outward, really try to connect with the stakeholders and partners in the mission as much as possible. And then second, the leader must also turn inward, must really also take care of oneself in this very difficult time. So let's begin. Next slide, please. Let's begin with the turning outward to connect to others. And here, I think the key thing is communicating. You need to communicate effectively, maintain transparency, and provide frequent updates. The leadership literature talks about crisis communicators need to do five things well. Number one, give people what they need when they need it. Uh, you must understand that in a crisis, the people's information needs evolve, they change, and so should the message of the communicator should also change. Different forms of information can help listeners to stay safe, cope mentally, and connect to a deeper sense of purpose and stability. Next slide, please. Here, I think these are some examples when our employees are feeling confused or anxious, then what they need are facts, not speculation, and clear instructions for how to protect their safety. When they feel uneasy or worn down, then we need to have clarity on long-term plans, positive stories, chances to connect. When they're feeling ready for change, when they have a sense of loss, the communicators need to communicate, leaders need to communicate a new vision of the future, a chance to grieve. Next slide, please. The second thing that can be done in turning to others is in terms of communication is communicate clearly, simply, and frequently. Do not give too much, and you must communicate as simply as possible. Focus on keeping listeners safe and healthy, and it's not a problem to repeat. Number three is to choose candor over charism. Trust is never more important than a crisis. Be honest, be transparent. The leader should not be afraid to show vulnerability so that we can build transparency. Next slide, please. Also, we must revitalize resilience. As things become more difficult, we need to communicate by accentuating the positive and strengthening the communal bonds to restore confidence. Number five, I think the crisis communicator must distill meaning from chaos. That meaning making that we talked about, that we say that this crisis will end and we help people make sense of what has happened. We establish a clear vision or a mantra of how the organization and its people will emerge. Next slide, please. Um, we also need to really turn towards others to connect with others, students, parents, faculty, staff, administrators. We need to, when we turn to them, we have to demonstrate empathy because it's really a stressful time, even tragic. We ask questions, we listen a lot, and we prioritize health and well being. Next slide, please. So we listen, alleviate their fear and anxiety. We try to really be aware of what they're feeling, and we try to show them empathy and compassion. Next slide, please. In this connection towards others, I think the important thing is we need to bring our school community together, teachers, administrators, faculty, staff, our parents, our alumni together so we can move forward. And there are 5 things that we can do: develop perspective on the situation, foster belonging, number 2. Third, take care of our people, tune in to our stakeholders. And number 5, reimagine and plan the post-crisis future. Next slide, please. So the first one, developing perspective. I think we really need to give our communities, our stakeholders, moments to breathe and set the tone for such healing, and realize that we don't have, no leader has all the answers. And we provide safe workplace forums for our teachers to express emotions, to share their stress, their anxiety, and to refocus on the work and the mission. I know that many schools are already doing this. We have now what's Zoommustahan. We spend time just to using online, using Zoom or using Google Meet to just to do kumustahan. Uh, some departments in the Ateneo are using what they call e-numan, E for electronic. They come together just to share stories, catch up with each other, not always just focus on the work that needs to be done online, the classes to be prepared, but just a time just to connect with each other personally and share how they are feeling, where they are. And that's really important. We need to give perspective, develop perspective, and set the tone for healing and supporting each other. Next slide, please. We need to do foster belonging and inclusion. Uh, People can often feel they are in the same storm with others, but they do not feel that they are in the same boat. We need to make sure that all our stakeholders feel joined together in the crisis. We make sure that people feel heard and included, enable individuals to freely express themselves, and have a feeling, try to develop a sense of community, inclusivity, trust, and belonging. Next slide, please. The third one is really taking care of our people. We've said this often. We have to show first, we understand, show empathy and compassion. We understand the feelings of our teachers, of our administrators. We also expand concerns about their own families. uh, and that we try to, as much as we can, show compassionate acts to further a mutual supportive community. Encourage the support that employees give to each other. Next slide, please. Of course, taking care of people is really practical gestures as much as we can, some extended leave, some additional sick days, expanded health coverage, assuring educational benefits for their children, relief assistance. I think we need to address this, and I know how difficult this is, especially if the financial situation is very strained. But as much as we can, we try to take care of our people. And then number 5, next slide please, is to tune in to our stakeholders, be in touch with the students, the parents, the faculty, the staff, the trustees, and that always try to make sure that we are on the same page. We reconfirm what our objectives are, and we generate buy-in in what we are doing. So if we say we're going online, that we try to get everybody's support in this effort. And of course, I think you know this already. You have to meet often, very frequent meetings, regular online fora with faculty, with students, with your management teams, with your president's councils. just to be always be in touch, and in a very fast changing situation, you are really in touch, and you are on the same page with each other. Next slide, please. The fifth one is really to reimagine a post-crisis next normal, um, that we refocus from trauma and look ahead to a better future. We try to also channel that we pull together and work together to build a desirable future, and the leaders need to ignite hope, create an image of a future organization where people will be excited about. We know that there is life post COVID. There is our schools will not only survive post COVID, but will even thrive because of this pandemic. And we need to give that hope. Next slide, please. And of course, I think as Catholic schools, we really have our North Star. Our North Star is really our mission and identity as Catholic schools. And we need to be able to reimagine this and say, this Catholic schools' mission and identity is so important that this will still be valid in the next normal, that we will still continue to try to serve the Catholic mission of the school, and also try to promote the Catholic identity of the school, even in this next normal that is still unclear. But we are sure that we will strive and we will flourish because we are always guided by this North Star of our mission and identity. Next slide, please. I go now to the second aspect of leading during the crisis. We talked about turning outward. We talked about reaching out to our stakeholders and the importance of communication and the different things we need to do as we turn outward to our stakeholders. But there's also a very important aspect in leadership during a crisis, and that is really self-care. And here I'd like to just briefly mention five things we can do for self-care. We need to adapt your own what's called the personal operating model. You need to manage our energies. We need to practice reflection. We need to practice gratitude daily and often. And we need to open ourselves to other expressions of care from other people. Next slide, please. The daily operating model, again, I'm sorry it's not so clear, but here it's really trying to bring together different aspects. What are our priorities? Number one, what is the purpose, my personal aspirations, what are the values that are important to me, what are the principles important to me. You have to think about your roles at work, your role in your, if you're religious, in your religious community or in your family, your different friendships, the close friends that you need, you can get support from and give support to. You need to think about work, how to create win-win situations. And as leaders during a crisis, you need to be inspirational, be a role model, be able to inspire individuals and teams to build capabilities and competence. The third element in this operating model is time. You have to be present, make sure that you are organized in your schedule. You need to be efficient in your time management in what you will do. We all know because of Zoom and because of online meetings, we are having more meetings now, much more than usual because of the easy technology that's there. And I also noticed that the meetings are getting longer and longer. So we need to be more efficient in managing that. And then also we need to make the right trade-offs. What are the priorities that you want to attend to? Number four in the operating model is your energy. You need to manage your energy to be self-aware, and have practices that have good work-life balance, taking care of our physical needs, sleep, nutrition, exercise, taking care of our mind, mindfulness, emotional flexibility. We have time for some space for renewal and for caring for others and belonging. So again, just a simple way to try to organize our own self in our effort for self-care. Next slide, please. Of course, we mentioned this already, managing your energy, balancing work needs with your own physical well-being. In a crisis, you really need recovery time. You cannot just be on the go 24/7 because burnout is very real. You need to have some recovery time, both physically, mentally, and psychologically. Otherwise, then you will not be effective as a leader. Uh, of course, there are certain practices that we can always do: prayer, meditation, breathing exercises, exercise, and even taking power naps, good siestas, just to refresh yourselves in the middle of the day. So managing energy is part of self-care. Next slide, please. Then there is also, of course, practicing reflection. We reflect daily about critical situations that happen during the day. What moments were difficult? Why? How did you feel? Why did you respond that way? Reflection also allows you to see the big picture. Reflection allows you to see why do you react in this way and what provokes you, what are its drivers. It's also helpful to ask trusted friends, colleagues to give you feedback about critical moments and how you respond under pressure. I write this and I always remember our Jesuit, our Ignatian practice of examen. This is what examen is. It's really going over your day and trying to find out where was God present in your life, what are the challenges, and how did you respond with God's help. Practicing reflection. Next slide, please. Of course, again, this is part of the examen. I think it's very important in self-care that we really practice gratitude often. Gratitude, we know, really is very good for our mental health. It renews our energy and our hope. There are ways that we can practice gratitude. We can keep a gratitude journal. We have a gratitude letter to some people. We can make sure we say thank you sincerely to someone who has helped us at least once a day. So again, this is very much part of the examen that we know about in our spiritual practice, that we need to give thanks for the many graces and blessings we have received. And this is good for our mental health and for our spiritual health also. Next slide, please. And again, I think part of self-care is that we also are open to other people expressing support for us, others' expressions of care, opening ourselves to their empathy, to their compassion. We can share our emotions to them in response to their caring words. And we know that we have to maintain our own emotional stability, we can build a close support network. Uh, I'm always grateful as a Jesuit that I have a Jesuit community that I can always come home to. In the university, I am president, but I know that when I go home to the Jesuit residence, I am a brother. I am one of friends in the Lord, and I know that I can express myself and share what I feel, share friendship, relax, be with people who share the same mission, the same values, the same ideals. And that's very important, I think, that we have that close support network that can be provided by families or by our community. But it's very important that we give time to that and we open ourselves to that expressions of care. Next slide, please. So let me end with these slides. I'd like to talk about the fourth part. There is a spirituality of crisis leadership. And thinking about this, I'm always struck that Pope Francis often speaks of the God of surprises. In his first interview, uh, when he was elected, one of his first interviews, he said that he often speaks of this God of surprises. And I think as a good Jesuit, he learned this from our father, Saint Ignatius Loyola. Because for Saint Ignatius, God is always Deus semper major, God who is always greater. That is the God of Ignatius, and that is our God, God of surprises, a God who always surprises us, a God who is always greater. Why? Because his thoughts and his ways, his love and his dreams are always beyond ours. We are always we always have a God who will always surprise us because he is Deus semper major. Next slide, please. And therefore, in this spirituality of crisis leadership, I think during this crisis, we are really invited to open spaces in our hearts for the ever greater God, to listen to the God of surprises, to allow this God to lead us out of our comfort zones to greater freedom, greater service, deeper joy. I think this is really the spirituality that we are asked for, invited to practice during this time of VUCA, when it is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. We need to open our hearts, open spaces in our hearts for the ever greater God. We need to listen to the God of surprises. And we need to allow this God to lead us out of our comfort zones, to what we are used to our favorite business as usual. To lead us out of that, because if we follow His lead, He will lead us to greater freedom, greater service, and deeper joy. Next slide, please. Of course, in the end, I think we can always turn to Mary, our mother, in this spirituality of crisis leadership, because she too is really a model. I think we can say that Mary's life is an open ended yes to life as it unfolds. She was told that she would be the mother of God. She was told that Elizabeth, her cousin, her old cousin, was suddenly pregnant. She was told to suddenly go into exile in Egypt. When she tries to look for her adult son, her adult son tells her that who is my mother, who is my brother, my sister. It is not my biological mother, but the ones who listen to the word of God and keep it. And yet Mary always has this open-ended yes to that. She is there at the foot of the cross as Jesus is suffering, and she is there in the famous image of the Pieta as she holds the dead body of her son. She is there when her risen son is risen again and makes her appearance to her. And her response was always an open-ended yes to life as it unfolds. And I think her life teaches us that God will ceaselessly surprise us. God is a God of surprises, and Mary teaches us that God will always surprise us, never-endingly surprise us. But Mary also teaches us that God will always be present with us amidst all the surprises. And that is where we gain courage, we gain hope, we gain inspiration, because even though it is uncertain, it is volatile, it is complex, it is ambiguous, we know God will always be present with us amidst all the surprises if we say yes to Him, if we are open in our hearts to this God of surprises, if we are willing to be led by this God beyond our comfort zones towards greater freedom, greater service, and deeper joy. Daghang salamat. My last slide here is I'd like to acknowledge that most of the leadership qualities and analysis, I use the materials from McKinsey and Company. I give the web link there. These are not my original thoughts. I have found the work of McKinsey very helpful. So I give that acknowledgement and I put that reference there. But I'd like to end now. Daghang salamat for listening, and I can take any questions or comments or suggestions. Maraming salamat po. God bless us all.